If you travel to the Monino Air Force Museum, just outside of Moscow, you will find fields full of legendary aircraft. You will see MiGs, Sukhois and Tupolevs, the proud history of Soviet aviation. But if you walk to the far edge of the field, near the tall grass, you will find something that doesn't belong. It looks like the skeleton of a prehistoric sea monster, or perhaps the wreckage of a crashed UFO. It has a wide, flat body that looks like a turtle shell. It has massive, bulging pods on the sides. The cockpit looks like the eye of a giant insect. The wings have been ripped off, leaving only a strange, lifting fuselage. Visitors stare at it in confusion. Is it a plane? Is it a boat? Is it a spaceship? This is the Bartini-Beriev VVA-14. It is, without a doubt, the strangest aircraft ever built during the Cold War. It was designed to be the ultimate weapon, a 52-ton amphibious bomber that could take off vertically from the ocean, fly at 500 miles per hour just inches above the waves, and hunt down American nuclear submarines. It was a machine of contradictions. It was brilliant and it was insane. It was futuristic and it was doomed. This is the story of the Soviet water spaceship, a machine that tried to defy the laws of aerodynamics and the laws of common sense at the same time. To understand why the Soviets built such a bizarre machine, you have to understand the fear that gripped Moscow in the 1960s. The Cold War had moved underwater. The United States Navy had just launched the George Washington-class submarines. These were the first true ballistic missile submarines. They carried the Polaris nuclear missile. These subs could hide anywhere in the vast oceans. They could stay submerged for months, and they could launch a nuclear strike that would wipe Moscow off the map in 15 minutes. The Soviet High Command was terrified. They had no way to find these silent killers fast enough. Ships were too slow to chase a nuclear sub. Helicopters had limited range. Conventional airplanes couldn't land on rough water to listen with sonar. They needed a new kind of vehicle, something that combined the speed of a jet fighter with the seaworthiness of a boat and the vertical takeoff ability of a helicopter. It sounded impossible. But there was one man in the Soviet Union who didn't believe in the word impossible. His name was Robert Bartini. Bartini was a character straight out of a spy novel. He wasn't Russian. He was an Italian nobleman, a baron. He was born into an aristocratic family in Austria-Hungary. But in the 1920s, he turned his back on his wealth, became a dedicated communist, and fled fascist Italy to help build the Soviet Union. The Soviets called him the Red Baron. But in the engineering world, he was known as the second strange Italian, the first being Leonardo da Vinci. Bartini was a genius, but he was also arguably mad. He studied physics in dimensions that other engineers couldn't understand. He believed that the perfect aircraft shouldn't look like a bird. It should look like a wingless lifting body. When the Navy asked for a submarine hunter, Bartini proposed the VVA-14. VVA stood for Vertical-Novzletaющая amphibia, vertical-takeoff amphibious aircraft. He promised the generals a machine that could land on any ocean, in any weather, deploy sonar buoys, locate the American subs, and destroy them with torpedoes. The generals were skeptical, but the threat of the American Polaris missiles was so great that they gave the mad Italian the green light. Construction began in 1968 at the Beriev factory in Taganrog. What emerged from the hangar was a monster. The VVA-14 looked alien because it was designed to exploit the ground effect. Bartini shaped the fuselage to trap a cushion of air underneath it, allowing it to skim the water efficiently. But the real insanity was the propulsion system. To achieve vertical takeoff from the water, Bartini didn't use a rotor like a helicopter. He decided to use raw jet power. He designed a battery of 12 separate RD-36 lift engines. These were buried in the center of the fuselage, blasting air directly downwards to push the 52-ton beast into the sky. Once it was airborne, Two other massive Soloviev turbofan engines mounted on the back would ignite, pushing the aircraft forward. 14 jet engines. The plumbing alone was a nightmare. The fuel consumption was astronomical. The noise was deafening. But Bartini wasn't finished. He had to solve the problem of landing on rough water. Metal floats are heavy and create drag. So Bartini came up with a solution that sounded brilliant on paper but was terrible in reality: inflatable pontoons. He designed massive rubber floats, 46 feet long. They would be inflated with air for landing on water and then sucked back in and retracted during flight to make the plane aerodynamic. It was the most complex landing gear ever imagined. On September 4th, 1972, the prototype was ready. The test pilot, Yuri Kuprianov, was a brave man. He strapped himself into the insect eye cockpit. He was sitting on top of a machine that had never flown, surrounded by experimental engines. Amazingly, the VVA-14 flew. It took off from a conventional runway. It handled surprisingly well. It was stable. It looked like a giant turtle soaring through the clouds. But the moment they tried to use it as an amphibian, the dream began to fall apart. The problem started with the inflatable pontoons. Rubber and high-speed jet aircraft do not mix well. The pontoons were fragile. In the cold waters of the Sea of Azov, the rubber became stiff. The inflation system was unreliable. The engineers watched in horror as the massive floats twisted and warped. They had no choice. They ripped out the inflatable system and replaced it with rigid metal pontoons. This added tons of extra weight and ruined the aerodynamics, but at least the plane wouldn't sink. But the fatal blow came from the engines. The 12 lift engines required for vertical takeoff were never delivered. The engine manufacturer, Rybinsk Motors, couldn't make them reliable enough. They kept overheating, vibrating, or exploding on the test bench. So the VVA-14, the vertical takeoff wonder, never actually took off vertically. Not once. It was forced to fly like a normal airplane using long runways. It became a compromised machine. It was too heavy to be a good patrol plane, and without the vertical takeoff, it was useless for its specific mission. It was a machine waiting for technology that didn't exist yet. Then in 1974, tragedy struck. Robert Bartini, the visionary father of the project, died suddenly. Without his charisma and political influence to protect the project, the vultures began to circle. The Soviet military looked at the VVA-14 and saw a money pit. They saw a complicated, expensive toy that required 14 engines to do what a simple helicopter could do. The project was slowly strangled. The funding dried up. By 1976, the VVA-14 was grounded forever. It had made 107 flights. It had proven that the shape could fly, but it never hunted a single submarine. It never dropped a single torpedo. The prototype was stripped of its valuable engines and electronics. For years, it sat on a floating barge, rotting in the sun. Eventually, the hull was dragged to the Monino Museum. But because it was so large and strange, they didn't have a hangar for it. They dumped it in a field, half disassembled. The wings were cut off, the nose was broken. And there it sits today. If you go to Monino, you can touch the cold aluminum skin of the water spaceship. It is a sad sight. The paint is peeling, revealing the Soviet red star fading underneath. But even in its ruined state, it commands respect. It stands as a monument to the gigantomania and the fear of the Cold War. It represents a time when engineers were given blank checks to build the impossible. The VVA-14 failed, yes, but it failed because it was too ambitious. It tried to be a boat, a plane, a helicopter, and a hovercraft all at the same time. It is a reminder that in engineering, complexity is the enemy of reliability. But looking at it, you can't help but wonder, what if the engines had worked? What if the rubber pontoons had held? We would have seen fleets of these silver turtles skimming across the oceans, terrifying the crews of American submarines. Instead, we have a skeleton in the grass, a ghost of a future that never arrived. Thanks for watching Iron Legacy. If you enjoyed this story of the Soviet sea monster, hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Do you think we will ever see amphibious aircraft like this again, or is the era of the giant seaplane over? See you in the next one.